What is up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Not So Stupid podcast. Today, we're going to be breaking down Ramadan fitness and nutrition, mostly answering questions asked by my Instagram followers about Ramadan, what they are worried about, what kind of tips and tricks they need, and I'm going to give you a lot of valuable practical application for different things that I've used going through Ramadan with different goals. I've had several Ramadans where I've gone through muscle building phases. I've gone through several Ramadans where I've had fat loss goals, and I'm going to be helping you find answers to commonly asked questions you probably have. So I have a good amount of questions here from my Instagram followers that I'll be answering for you, and I'm going to be throwing in a lot of other stuff as well that I think are going to be very valuable for you to know and understand. Before we go into this episode, though, I do want to say there are going to be other Ramadan resources if you want other perspectives as well. I have a Ramadan blog that I wrote about 2 years ago that got a lot of positive feedback from people all over the world, really, that I will be linking in the show notes if you want to read a certain perspective. And then my first podcast episode ever a year ago was about Ramadan. So it is a different perspective. It's not going to be a lot of tips and tricks. It's more science-based than it is, little do-hows and whatever, but really exciting that it's been a year of podcasting and I've been so consistent with it, and all the feedback has been amazing. So on a side note, that will also be linked in the show notes. So if you want to go through to episode 1, that will be going through the different things you need to be aware of going into Ramadan, and just helping you be your best self. So we got all different angles with this, so that you can have all the information you need going into it and have all the confidence you need going into it to have the most successful Ramadan yet for your fitness and nutrition journey. Now, before we get started with answering the questions and going through the different strategies, I do want to say that for a lot of people, they approach fitness and nutrition in Ramadan with a on and off mindset. We talked about this in the discipline episode a couple weeks ago, where you look at discipline as a light switch. They're going to look at their fitness and nutrition during this time period as a light switch as well. For a lot of people, they'll say, I want to just put this on hold entirely. I don't want to do any kind of fitness and nutrition. I don't want to train. I don't want to work on my health or focus on healthy eating or anything like that. They'll completely turn it off, and they'll again, put it on pause for an entire month, which is a relatively short amount of time in respect to the span of your life. But this is 1 month every single year that you're going to be going through every single year for the rest of your life. So it's always better to learn how to work with it and adjust your goals accordingly. So instead of looking at it as an on-off switch, looking at it as a dial, and instead of going through Ramadan with 100% intensity of your fitness and nutrition goals, turning the dial back a little bit, working on 60 to 50%, 50 to 70% intensity for your fitness and nutrition goals, focusing on the main things that you want to accomplish and rolling with that, as opposed to giving up on it entirely, because a month is, again, a relatively short amount of time, but it's also a long enough time to make a positive or negative change significant enough. So it can either be a good step forward for you or a big step backward for you that you need to overcome. So if you've built some positive momentum up to this point, and Ramadan is always a busy time of year for you, and you're always like overwhelmed and stressed, instead of turning it off and completely and not doing anything, just turn the dial back and lower the intensity of what you've been doing. Instead of training 5 days a week, train 3 days a week. Instead of training for an hour every day, train for half an hour every day. Whatever you need to do to adjust it, work with that. And we'll obviously be covering that throughout this podcast episode. But I want to share that perspective because, again, I see it all the time. I hear about it all the time. People want to put things off during this month that they could easily continue to do or start doing if they haven't been doing it yet, and make big strides in that direction. Because again, this is something you're going to experience in Ramadan every year for the rest of your life. So you can either keep using it as an excuse to not do anything and put yourself 3 steps, 5 steps backwards, or learn to work with it, understand how you can approach it every single year so that you don't have to worry about it year in and year out as something that is going to hold you back. So shifting that perspective is going to be really important, and understanding that it's not about perfection, but about doing something during this time that's going to be the most important thing. Now, with that being said, the first tip and trick that I really want to cover here that I find really useful for a lot of people is going into Ramadan with a high intensity. So I just mentioned, turning down the dial a little bit and kicking back the intensity during Ramadan. But for the 2 to 3 weeks leading into Ramadan, which it's going to be about 2 weeks by the time this podcast episode is released, you want to do as much as you can during this time period and really optimize your body, because when Ramadan comes, you want to take a step back and relax and use it as a time to recover. So for these next 2 weeks, have everything on point. Have your nutrition on point. Get every training session you can. Lift as much weight as you can for all those training sessions. Make sure that you're recovering well every single day. Sleep 7 to 8 hours every single night, because you're probably not going to be able to sleep that much during Ramadan. What else? Progress through your lifts. Get good, strong, progressive overload. Hit some PRs, because once Ramadan comes around, things are obviously going to change. We're going to adjust and turn back the dial a little bit, and that'll be a good time to recover. Recover through the month for all the hard intensity that you put in the 2 to 3 weeks leading up to it. So in this time frame, definitely take advantage of being on point with everything. Take advantage of going as hard as you can with your cardio, if you're doing cardio, with your lifts, with your nutrition. Make sure you're spot on, you're eating your meals regularly, you're getting everything you need to get on point every single day. And sleep. Make sure that you're sleeping enough too. This is gonna be one of the most important ones. Sleep and hydration. Make sure you're staying hydrated over these next 2-3 weeks. Be overly hydrated if you need to be, but just get in all the water you need, because once Ramadan comes, you're not gonna get as much sleep, and it's gonna be a lot harder for you to get enough water. So those are usually 2 big setbacks in Ramadan that most people kind of let slip up, and can be a big detriment to their results going forward. So that is one thing I want to start off with. These next 2-3 weeks, go as hard as you can, do as much as you can, because when Ramadan comes, we're turning the dial back a little bit, and we're taking it as a short period of time to recover or continue with your goals, right? So that is the next thing that I want to transition to, is be clear with what your goals are during Ramadan. If you are in the middle of a fat loss phase, in the middle of a muscle building phase, do you want to continue that, or do you want to take a break and focus on maintenance for a little bit and enjoy Ramadan a little more? So be clear with your intentions with that. Again, it's not about doing everything you can all the time. It's about recognizing your priorities. For some people, they have a more open schedule, a more flexible schedule. They're able to continue to hit these goals, continue to work on their fat loss, continue to work on their muscle building through Ramadan without any issues. For other people, it becomes way too much to go through Ramadan, go to Taraweeh, go to sleep, go to have suhoor, then wake up and go to your 9 to 5 job, and then go home and cook dinner. Like it's a lot on your plate all at once, right? Because you're not gonna, a lot of your night is taken up because of Taraweeh. So you lose a good chunk of hours every single day. And at that point, again, it becomes a priority game. What's going to be more important to you? Are you okay with taking it back a step and focusing on maintenance because you want to focus on Ramadan, the spiritual aspect of Ramadan, and managing your work and your home life? Or do you want to put that energy, do you have the ability with your schedule, with your lifestyle, to push forward and do pretty much the same thing you've been doing, just at shifted hours, to continue working toward your goals? And this is something, I can't answer for you. You're going to have to answer for yourself. But it takes an honest reflection of previous years, an honest reflection of how your job life is going to be, an honest reflection of what you actually want to accomplish to go forward with this. So that is the next most important thing here, is knowing your priorities and just following through with that. Because again, it's okay to dial it back and focus on maintenance and not work toward a muscle building goal and not work toward a fat loss goal, and just go through and maintain those habits as best as you can. Still go through training, but not really worry about or try to focus on training for an hour and a half, 4 days a week. Still good to, work on eating healthy, but not having your calories 100% on point all the time, It's again, it's a priority game here, and your priorities are going to be different than my priorities, going to be different than someone else's priorities, and you just have to be honest with yourself about that, and then just follow through with it accordingly. And if you do want to focus on maintaining, going really hard these next 2 weeks are going to be the important part for you. That's going to be something you do not want to miss, because it'll give you the most results for a short amount of time, and still put you a step forward after Ramadan is over. So that is really important to know. Again, remember your priorities and understand what you want out of Ramadan for your physical health, for your time spent as a whole. Now, I'm going to go through some or all the questions that were asked for me on Instagram. So the first one is, how good are dates? Is in the food. How good is tamar for you? And tamar is really good. It's actually kind of amazing that this has been the sunnah to break your fast with tamar after every single fast, because it is a fast digesting carbohydrate, and it fills you up with energy pretty quickly. So it replenishes the energy you've missed out on throughout the day, or you've depleted throughout the day, I should say, and recharges you pretty fast. So tamar is like one of the best carbs to start your iftar with. Any kind of simple sugar that is quickly digesting, that is going to be very helpful for you during Ramadan, because again, when you've gone through an entire day of fasting, these are still the longer days for everyone on the northern hemisphere. We're fasting for over 12 hours in most cases. You are going to be exhausted. You're going to be drained. So you want some quick digesting food to break your fast with. Ideally, quick digesting protein and quick digesting carbs. Dates, tamar, are a really good source of quick digesting carbs that are going to replenish you really quickly. And that is going to be something you want to prioritize. So, if you like tamar and you enjoy it, and it's easy for you to follow, and it's going to be in your household, just like it's going to be in pretty much everyone else's household, definitely try to break your fast with it. I always encourage everyone to have the first things they eat when they break their fast to be a fast digesting carb and a fast digesting protein. You want both ends of the spectrum here. So a fast digesting protein is going to be like a whey protein, that's usually the fastest digesting protein. So a protein shake and water plus tamar is like a very good simple thing to do to help replenish all of the energy that you lost throughout the day. Other forms of fast digesting carbs and protein, all fruits are going to be faster digesting. White rices and bread are going to be faster digesting than brown rices and wheat breads. White meat is going to be faster digesting than red meat. Eggs are going to be faster digesting than any meat. And really, that's kind of the hierarchy. That's going to be pretty much all the options you're going to have in terms of what you're eating at dinner time. So having whey protein is going to be ideal, especially if you have that on deck and you still have muscle building and fat loss goals. Take advantage of that and use that to your use that to help you gain energy in the evening time, especially if you're going to be training in the evening time, and just put you in a better position for the rest of tomorrow as well. Because when you start with a fast digesting food at iftar, you will feel better 24 hours from then because you took that priority. And we'll talk about what to have during suhoor as well a little later. The next question is always the most popular question, is when should I work out? What are the best times for me to work out? And this is always going to depend, again, on your schedule and the type of workout you're doing. So for regular resistance training, so if you're weightlifting, going to the gym, you're going to be lifting, your goal is to lift pretty heavy, you're doing a regular program, let's say an upper lower 4 days a week program or a full body 3 days a week program, the number one best time to lift is going to be after iftar by a couple hours. So you have your iftar, you don't have too big of a meal, and we're going to talk about the psychology of that in a little bit too. You don't have too big of a meal, you have a reasonably sized meal, so you're not weighed down, you just find contentment in what you're eating, and then relax for a couple hours, maybe take a pre-workout if you need to take a pre-workout and you're going to be somebody that stays up the whole night all the way to suhoor. Take a pre-workout, and 2 hours after your iftar, hit the gym. And if you're going to hit a full hour in the gym, that'll be really good time to do that. That'll be the most ideal time to do that. And it's important that during this time, between iftar and suhoor in general, really, you're hydrating as much as possible. Like I mentioned earlier, hydration is one of the big pitfalls for a lot of people. They get pulled muscles, they feel terrible, and their risk of injury is so much higher, their energy is so much lower, their mood is so irregular because they're not hydrated so properly. So making sure that you're hydrating as much as you can between iftar and suhoor, and particularly between iftar and your lifting, is going to be really helpful to help with your performance and just again help with your recovery and progression through your goals. So the number one best time is after a couple hours after iftar. The next best time is going to be after Isha, after Tarawih. So that's probably around midnight for most people, 11 p.m. midnight. That's going to be the next best time to work out, because again, you want to have food in your system, you want to have water in your system, you want to have digested some food properly. That would be the next ideal time. The third ideal time is going to be like pre-suhoor or post-suhoor. I would put these as a tie with each other. Again, the goal here is to be properly hydrated and to be properly hydrated and properly fed during this time period, or to have a meal right afterwards. So if you're going to, depending on your gym, if they're open 24 hours or if they open at a certain time, like really early, like 5 a.m., if you can get there pre-suhoor, have your workout, then have suhoor, that would be amazing. That would be a little better than having suhoor then working out, because you're going to be able to hydrate afterwards and recover, give some food into your body to recover and put you in a rest and digest state. Otherwise, there's no other time that I would recommend anyone to work out in. So it's going to be either after iftar in a couple hours, after Isha later in the evening, before suhoor by a couple hours as well, or right after suhoor. So not really waiting too long. You're gonna have your suhoor, pray fajr, and then you're gonna work out. That's what I mean by right after suhoor. You're not going to drag too long afterwards. You want to use that energy right there and then progress forward through the day. I do not recommend doing a resistance training workout before iftar. That is going to be the time you're most dehydrated. That's going to be the time you have the least amount of energy, and that is going to be the time where you're at your highest risk of injury. So I don't recommend doing resistance training at that time, but if you're going to be doing cardio, that's going to be a good time to do cardio. So low intensity steady state or moderate intensity steady state cardio, that will be ideal post suhoor, again really early in the morning, or at night before iftar. So if you want to go on the treadmill for 30 minutes and run at heart rate zone 3 for 30 minutes, that would be great. That's a great time to do that. Resistance training though, you want to avoid doing it at that time. Otherwise, any of the other times that I said are fair game for resistance training. Cardio, you can kind of do any time. I would avoid HIIT training just because it's going to be such a big stressor on the body. On top of the stress of fasting, on top of the stress of going through your day and working and doing all of that stuff, definitely would recommend low intensity steady state and moderate intensity steady state as the only forms of cardio that you do during this time period. So that was a really good question. The next question is, what should I eat? And that was a very broad question. So all food is fair game. There's going to be some foods that are better to have at certain times than other foods though. So like I mentioned earlier, when you break your fast at iftar, you want to have fast digesting carbs, you want to have fast digesting protein. That's going to be ideal in that time period. On the opposite end of the spectrum, when it comes to suhoor, you want to have slow digesting carbs and slow digesting protein. The reason being is because let's use casein protein as an example. This is a protein that's often found in dairy products like cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, things like that. If you have a slow digesting protein like casein, it's going to take about 6 to 8 hours for that to digest in your system. So from suhoor to 6 to 8 hours later, you're going to be slowly breaking down this protein and using that energy throughout the day, slowly and slowly and slowly and slowly. So for 8 hours, you're going to be pretty well fueled, as opposed to if you were to use a whey protein at sahur time that takes 1 to 2 hours to digest, you'd use that energy up pretty much right away. So focusing on slower digesting foods at sahur is going to be really helpful to help you sustain energy throughout the day. You know, if you're going to be working in the morning, if you plan on working out right after sahur, if you have commitments in the morning that you need to follow through with and you need to be energized for, that is going to be the best thing for you to aim for. So slower digesting proteins are going to be casein, like I said. That's going to be the best slow digesting protein to go for, and that is going to be, like I mentioned, most dairy products. So cottage cheese and Greek yogurt are going to be the best examples because you can find lactose-free versions of those, and that'll be great for everyone that is lactose intolerant and isn't. Another good option is going to be like lentils or a slower digesting plant-based protein that you can use at that time as well. And there's another one that's slipping my mind. Oh, peas. Peas and brown rice, they both have protein as well. Those are going to be slower digesting protein sources. Casein is the slowest, so that would be the best one to have. The other ones are slow as well, just not as slow as casein. So peas, brown rice, and lentils, those are going to be good plant-based options if you're lactose intolerant and you don't want to take a chance with cottage cheese and Greek yogurt. Even if they are lactose-free, you can go that route. Those, I think, digest 4 to 6 hours, so still a good amount of time to have energy with. And then casein being the best one, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, literally any kind of dairy is going to have casein in it, as long as it came from an actual dairy source, not like an almond milk source. So that's protein. On the carb spectrum, you're going to be focusing on the opposite of what I talked about earlier. So whole grain carbs are slower digesting. Oats are pretty slow digesting. Vegetables are slower digesting. The fibrous foods are pretty slower digesting. The brown rice, as I mentioned earlier, it has protein, it has carbs. That is also slower digesting. Those are going to be kind of your go-tos at that time period for sahur. So slow digesting foods for sahur so that you can have sustained energy throughout most of the day. You're still going to be pretty exhausted toward the end of the day. We have long fasting days ahead of us, but have those during sahur time. Fast digesting foods at iftar, right when you break your fast, so you can get that reburst of energy. And another thing that you should be eating is, again, having water as much as possible. Break your fast with water. Have a big glass of water. Mix anything you drink should have a good amount of water in it. If you're gonna have a protein shake, use water. If you're gonna make a coffee for yourself, if you're gonna be staying up at night, you make sure you mix it with a lot of water. Avoid liquid calories by any means necessary, and really try to get as much water as you can, and even eat your water as well. So there's gonna be a lot of hydrating foods, which are gonna be fruits and vegetables mostly, that you can eat that hydrate you, right? So watermelon is a very good example of this. It's made of 98% water. It's pretty low calorie. It's a high volume food. You can have a lot of watermelon and that'll count as water. Cantaloupes, same thing. Cucumbers, very popular, same idea. Any of those foods you can get a lot of water from. And this is going to be true for pretty much every fruit and vegetable. I would say 80% of them have a high water content that you can take advantage of. So those would be the foods to aim for, fruits, vegetables to keep you hydrated, fast digesting carbs, and proteins at iftar, slow digesting carbs, and protein at suhoor. Then obviously no food while you're fasting. Should I break my fast, work out, and then have a full meal? So we talked about that, but I do want to touch on this idea of how to approach the food that you're eating. It's really easy to overdo it, and I'm sure everyone's experienced this at some point in one of the many Ramadans that you've had, where you have iftar and then you pretty much knock out afterwards because you ate so much food. Don't go into it with that starving man's mentality that you need to eat everything you see. You're going to be eating with your eyes. You're going to overdo it because your stomach's not going to be as big, and you don't need to eat that much. So when you go into iftar, go in with the mentality of whatever you think you want to eat, have half of that. Eat that half, don't fill up your plate like a mountain with all those and everything. Have a solid portion, but not excessively big. You don't need to make up for anything that you lost. And eat slowly. so that your body can tell you when you're full and you can respond to it. Eat slowly, enjoy the food, and sit with an empty plate for a little bit before trying to fill your plate again. What you'll find is if you put a half portion, that will be just as good for you and you'll feel just as full as if you did double the portion. And this is something that you can apply in and out of Ramadan. Don't eat with your eyes. Focus on what you need to eat first. So have that, if you're gonna have chicken as a fast digesting protein, you're gonna have some white rice as well and maybe a little soup. Have reasonable portions of that on your plate. Drink your big glass of water first. Eat what's on your plate. Have another glass of water. Wait a couple minutes to see if your body is going to settle in and tell you that you're full, because there is a delayed response for how full, or for the feeling of fullness that you get from your body. Your stomach is going to take a few minutes to, I guess, check its inventory and tell you that it's full before signaling to your brain that it's full. So take a couple minutes to breathe, relax, and feel content. Because you don't need to be 100% full. You don't need to eat everything you see, no matter how big the spread is. Even at the hazumas you go to, it doesn't matter how big the spread is. Eat to what your contentment is, and start with doing a smaller portion than you think you need. Once you eat that, and if you're still full after eating that, have another serving. There's no issue with that. I'm not saying don't do that, but at least give your body the chance to tell you that enough is enough before you think enough is enough. So take advantage of that. I always like to use the phrase, which we talked about on another podcast as well, in the fat loss mantras: enough is as good as a feast. You can have all the food in front of you, but if you have what you need, if you have enough for yourself, that's going to be as good, if not better, than eating everything in sight, because you're not going to feel terrible afterwards, and you can still work out. You can still have a night with your friends. You can still go to Taraweeh and be energized and not be exhausted. You can do all those things because you didn't excessively eat at iftar. So just be mindful of what you're eating. Don't just eat because you see all the food. Eat because this is a solid portion of food that will lead to your contentment and enjoyment of the food that you have. So that was a good question. Should I break my fast, work out, and then have a full meal? I definitely recommend having more than just a tamar before you work out. Having a good amount of food will be important, a few hundred calories, but you don't want to overdo it because that will slow down your workout and limit your results. Best time to train, we talked about that. Oh, 2 people asked that. Build phase, how would I continue? So again, this is going to go back to talking about your priorities with Ramadan. If you have a flexible schedule, you can still commit an hour to working out after you work out. If you know that you can still commit an hour of training after you eat in the evening and still challenge yourself pretty well, I would definitely go through with that. I would say to lower the intensity and focus on full range of motion, mind-muscle connection over doing as much weight as possible. Intensity, by the way, in resistance training setting is how much weight you're doing. It's not going to be how hard you're sweating or how high your heart rate is. It's how much weight you're doing. So a high intensity exercise is going to be an exercise where you do a lot of weight and you can't move it too much. So you might not be super exhausted physically. Your heart rate might not be pumping. You might not be gasping for air, but your central nervous system is going to be fried because of all the intensity of that weight you needed to push and move it. So focusing on lower intensity movements during a build phase, focusing on strong mind-muscle connection, and going through a full range of motion, having a controlled eccentric and a full stretch with every rep, and having a nice strong contraction with every rep as well. So maybe not doing as much weight, but continuing to focus on going through that motion every single rep, every single set for the entire workout, however many days a week that you're going to be going. The way you can adjust your workout for a build phase is going to be using frequency to your advantage. So frequency being how many times you train a muscle throughout the week. If you are currently doing a bro split where you're doing chest and arms one day and then back one day and legs one day, you're training each muscle once a week basically, If you switch it to an upper lower twice a week or a full body 3-4 times a week, and you could train every muscle group multiple times a week, you can continue to build at a much faster rate than if you were to just do one muscle at a time. And you'll limit your soreness by an exponential amount if you do this as well. So you can use that to your advantage. Another thing I would like to mention with build phases is obviously if you're in a build phase, you need more calories. Use smoothies and shakes to your advantage. They're going to be high calorie. So there's a smaller window to eat all the calories you need in a day. For most people, they're not going to be able to hit that, especially if you're in a build phase. You need to be in a surplus. You're not going to be able to hit that. So using a smoothie that is filled with fruit, throw some peanut butter in there, throw a protein, scoop of protein in there, and make it 600, 700, 800, 900 calories. Again, this is for building people. For fat loss, this isn't ideal, but you do that and you throw some water in there as well, or ice, so that you can be hydrated. You'll get a lot of the calories you need really easy, because it's a lot easier to drink an 800 calorie smoothie than it is to eat 800 calories of food. So you can use that to your advantage as well. One thing I do want to say is, for either goal, regardless of what you're trying to do, I would say that we have a minimum protein goal that we need. We have a minimum, we'll ignore fat for now. We have a minimum protein goal that we need. For fat loss, usually you want to aim for 1.2 grams per pound of body weight on a daily basis. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you're going to try to aim for 160, 170 grams of protein every single day, which is a lot in a regular day. And now you have this shortened window of eating. It's going to be way more to try and fit that in. So instead of trying to aim for that higher range, let's aim for the lower range, which is 0.7 grams per pound of body weight, lean body mass for protein. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you're going to aim for 100 to 110 grams of protein, if I did my rough math right. So you need 50 grams less protein, which is a lot more realistic and a lot more reasonable for you to do on a daily basis. But you'll still be progressing towards your goals pretty well. Is it optimal? Maybe not in a laboratory setting, but it is optimal for the situation that we're in, because we do need to work around this. So even though it's not optimal for a regular day, this is going to be our optimal solution for a Ramadan day, a Ramadan night of eating. Next two questions are actually pretty good questions. Best time to weigh myself. So this one is really good, because usually when you weigh yourself, it's right when you wake up, after you use the bathroom, and before you eat or drink anything. That is going to be the best time to weigh yourself. But that is on a normal eating schedule. Now you won't be on a normal eating schedule. If you wake up first thing in the morning at 7 a.m., 8 a.m., you're going to have just eaten 2 hours ago. So you're going to be heavier than you actually are, because you're weighing yourself plus all the food that you ate. The best time to weigh yourself is going to be pre-suhoor. If you wake up for suhoor in the middle of the night, pre-suhoor, and this is going to depend on your schedule, how you use your time. I'm talking from a perspective of someone that works a 9-to-5 job that is going to be sleeping throughout the night for a majority of the night. The best time to weigh yourself is going to be pre-suhoor, when you wake up, and after you use the bathroom, before you eat or drink anything. That will be our best gauge for Ramadan weight without any food in you. It's not going to be ideal. You're probably going to weigh more than you did before Ramadan for the first week, but it's going to be a close enough range to keep that consistent. If you're somebody that sleeps through the whole day and is only awake at night, you're using that schedule to your advantage. You're staying up from iftar to suhoor every day, and then you're sleeping throughout the whole daylight time. When you wake up is going to be the best time, because it's essentially the same thing. You're still getting your 6 to 7 hours of sleep, but you're just waking up at a different time. That time you wake up in the afternoon, most likely, will be your best time to weigh yourself. So again, same thing. You wake up, use the bathroom before you eat or drink anything. If iftar already happened, you're going to be weighing yourself at that time. Those are going to be the two best times to weigh yourself, depending on what your schedule is like. And then, what time period do I track my calories? This is a good one too. So if you're going to be tracking your calories during Ramadan, I would recommend that you make your first meal iftar and your last meal suhoor. While this does span through 2 days of arbitrary time, right? After midnight, it's going to be tomorrow. But it's 1 day of circadian time, because that's going to be your first eating window, the start of your eating window, and the end of your eating window is going to be suhoor. So that'll be your body's start and finish for your quote-unquote daily nutritional needs and values that you met. So in that time frame is going to be what you log the first day. So let's say today, let me use the release day of this podcast. So today is going to be April 2nd. April 2nd at Maghrib, iftar is going to be my first meal, and I'm going to log that. My last meal for April 2nd is going to be suhoor, which will technically be fajr at April 3rd. So for April 2nd, I'm logging iftar, whatever I have after iftar, and then through the night, it'll turn into April 3rd. That suhoor at April 3rd, that'll be my last meal for April 2nd. That'll be my circadian eating schedule. You know, again, it's not the hours in the day are kind of arbitrary. We use them to keep track of time and make schedules and things like that. But for your eating window for each day, it's going to go from iftar to suhoor. And the last meal is going to be technically tomorrow, but you should count it toward your first day. This one, it's kind of hard to explain, but I hope I explained it well enough. So again, you have iftar, that's your first meal, whatever your last meal is until you start the next day's fast, that'll all count toward the same day. And you do that every day for 29 or 30 days, the duration of Ramadan. So all really good questions. Definitely appreciate everyone that chimed in and shared questions that they wanted to get in. I hope you found this extremely valuable and helpful. If you did, definitely share it with a friend. As I mentioned earlier, we have other resources in the show notes for you that will give you more insight on Ramadan, different things to focus on and what to prioritize so that you can have a successful fat loss or muscle building or maintenance Ramadan for yourself. So definitely check those resources out in the show notes. And Ramadan Mubarak to everybody. I hope everyone has a successful and loving and insightful Ramadan for themselves, and they are able to become better people for it. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the next episode.